Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast by InstantMediations.com, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube, the Instant Mediations app, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent. Hi, everyone. This is attorney Mac Pierre-Louis. I'm a lawyer, mediator, and arbitrator working throughout Florida and Texas.
And I am Natalia Ołowska-Czajka, based in Warsaw, Poland, advocate, mediator, arbitrator.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Mayer. I'm an arbitrator, mediator, and attorney, and I'm located in Houston, Texas, and I assist parties all around the country. And I am thrilled today to have the opportunity to introduce you to author Tammy Lenski. Just on a personal note, before I give you some of her prestigious background, when I first set out on my own to start a mediation and arbitration practice, I read the book that we'll be talking about today and then took a class with Tammy Lenski. And I credit her with much of my success since 2014. So I am just thrilled to be part of today's discussion. Dr. Lenski founded a conflict resolution firm in 1997. She helps individuals, teams, couples, businesses develop everyday conflict resolution practices to help them in their business and personal relationships. She has mediated thousands of cases and helped people find a path to resolution through all walks of life, and is a tremendous wealth of knowledge and resource for all of us, not just in the art of mediation, but also in how to market and build your mediation practice.
Thanks for such a gracious welcome, Sylvia. It's lovely to be here with all three of you today. And Sylvia, to know that you read the book so early in the success of your practice, that makes me very happy. Thank you. I am here in New Hampshire, which is in northern New England and the east coast of the United States. And we've got a blizzard blowing in soon. So hopefully we'll enjoy another good foot of snow before morning. So we're looking forward to that. We New Englanders like our snow.
And having the introduction already done, knowing who Tammy is, I want really to emphasize what sort of a pleasure it is to have you, and also for how many mediators it will be a pleasure to listen to that and take the takeaways with them into their practice. Because as Sylvia already said, this is a great thing that a book written in 2014 can now be seen from the perspective of the success it brought to many people, like with Sylvia, respectively, but also what it made you in your life to achieve, to think through. And this is the perspective I would want to adopt when I start. I just wanted to say that in your book, you focus on using mediators techniques into mediators marketing, trying to convert all that seems unpleasant about marketing to many mediators into something that is more understandable and easier to follow, making it a custom and a part of the mediation practice. Of course, the natural thing to that is, how do you do that? And what would you want to tell us about why you adopted this sort of perspective first?
I set out in private practice, as Sylvia said, back in 97. And my background was in higher ed. I had been a dean and vice president. I knew nothing about marketing. I wasn't really interested in marketing, but it became abundantly clear very quickly that even though I was able to use my higher ed connections to get early clients, that I was going to have to do something. And as I started thinking about marketing and learning about marketing, I was really turned off. And then sort of at the same time, a few years later, I was teaching grad students mediation, and they were also struggling with the same idea of having to market themselves, having to sell themselves, and how awful that the anticipation of that was for them. And I started thinking, gee, I need to write about what I did in case it's useful. I really just sort of felt an obligation to my grad students. And it turns out this book has had lasting power since it was first published in '08, which sort of still astonishes me. But I still get so many mediators every year writing and saying it helped them think about the act of marketing in a different way. So that was sort of the genesis of it.
Okay, so Tammy, I read most of your book, and in the beginning of the book, you share that while your career included managing people, because you said you worked in academia, so while your career included managing people and teaching, you didn't have a market in marketing. So do you believe that this is still the case and mediators can be successful using the skills they already have? Because you were able to pivot from the skill set you already had to then go into something that was totally foreign to you. But is this the case for many other mediators?
Mediators come into this field from every prior occupation under the sun. And for some attorneys, for example, it's not a prior occupation, it's a co-occupation. But I've trained and taught mediators who were Olympic horse equestrian trainers and anesthesiologists and all sorts of walks of life. And for most people who've gone through some basic and middle level mediation training, there's certain concepts that most people get as part of that. And that's the concepts of working with interests and reframing and building dialogue and building dialogue through speaking to what's important to other people. It's just these basic mediation concepts, basic conflict resolution concepts. And so I still believe that if people understood that they could take those same concepts and flip them on their head and use them in their marketing, marketing would be more palatable, and it's still relevant today. The tools might change a little bit, but tools are seductive, but the habits of mind, the way of thinking about marketing, I kind of think that's timeless. Back in '08, when I first wrote the book, people weren't really writing about this in this way. Today, you could pick up most marketing books and they may not be using the same language that I'm using, trying to speak to my fellow conflict resolution folks, but they're using the same general concepts that I first wrote about years ago.
So, Tammy, I'm curious. In 2015, I took your online course. If I remember right, it was called Thrive or something like that. And I'm just wondering, do you still offer anything like that?
I don't. When I wrote the book, I expected, okay, that's enough. I've said what I had to say about marketing. I don't really have anything more to say. And that was never my primary work. My primary work is my conflict resolution work. And what I didn't anticipate is people said, we want more. So I developed after the book, I did the second edition. People said, we want more. Can you help us do a deeper dive? Can you do more hand holding? Some people wanted me to coach them. That's fine. I can do that privately. But I found that doing an online course would help people reach a lot of people. And it did. But I had to make a decision. It was starting to eat into my conflict resolution work, which is really what feeds my heart. And so after several years, I said, it's not really, marketing is wonderful. I love doing my marketing. I love reaching out to prospective clients and engaging prospective clients. But teaching others about marketing, I think there are a lot of other folks that really want to make that their primary work. And I'm happy to let them do that. And so I still occasionally speak for an ADR group on marketing. I still occasionally have conversations like we're having today about marketing, but 99% of my work energy is related to doing the conflict resolution work itself. So that brings us to today. Pretty much, I don't anticipate that changing in the future.
And about changes in the future that we didn't anticipate was, of course, the pandemic and how it changed the mediation practice and lives of many of us. In your book, you focus on asking about the mediators a lot of personal questions of how they value certain things in life, what they value about their mediation practice. And this is all to lead people to do their mediation the most effective way, but also to do their marketing work the most efficient way. And now with the online practice, how would some of these questions differ if asked today? How does building a mediation practice differ today in the online world?
I don't think it fundamentally does, but for shifting two things, we're doing more things, we're engaging with people much more frequently online than we were 2 years ago. And our reach is much further. I have clients all over the world. Of course, I've had clients all over the world for a very long time because I've been active on the net since 2002. So, and was doing online work long before, because I think my first graduate course that I ever taught, not in mediation, it was in my prior work, was in 1999. So I've been teaching online for a long time. And the minute you go online, it gives you a geographic boundlessness that you don't have when you're doing things solely in your region in person. So that has changed, but I don't think the fundamental ideas have changed about, the book was about, who are you? Who are you in this work? Who do you want to be doing this work with? Who are the people that matter to you? I talked to so many mediators, and a lot of them were attorneys who said, I really hate my clients. I don't want to work with these people. I'm sick of them. I don't want to, attorneys were saying, I don't want to build a practice based on having to work with the same people I have to work with as an attorney. And that's not universally true by any stretch, but there was a percentage that I heard that from. And, and I always say, my gosh, if you're trying to market to people you don't even like, or you're not that interested in, you might love them, but you just don't have much interest in the problems that they have. That's making marketing so hard, right? It's hard enough. No one gets out of bed. I think unless you're a professional marketer, most of us do not get out of bed and go, yay, I have a marketing day ahead of us, right? So, the book is about, who do you care about? How do you figure that out? Who are you in this work? How are you different in this work than the mediator next door? How do you think about yourself in this work? And those fundamentals really don't change over time. If you asked, if you went to a marketing firm and said, we want to hire you to market for me, some of the same kinds of questions that they're going to come back at you with are questions about who you are in this work and what you stand for and what you believe in. And that matters. That matters to being authentic in this work, and also feeling like you don't have to become somebody you aren't really in order to do this thing called marketing or selling, however you want to name it or label it.
So before we continue, I wanted to just pivot a little bit to your website, which obviously is going to be the primary place that people can check out a little bit more about you and learn more about your work and see copies of your books. So the book we're talking about today, Making Mediation Your Day Job, is not your only work. So what are the other books that you've written? Can you go a little bit into what made you write The Conflict Pivot and how it differs from Making Mediation Your Day Job?
Yeah, The Conflict Pivot is about conflict resolution. It's not about marketing at all. I had that book in my mind actually in 2008 when I was trying to decide which book to write. And I was feeling some pressure about my grad students, as I explained, but the book that was in my heart was The Conflict Pivot. And I spoke to a friend who is in the publishing industry, lives in Chicago. And I said, so I have these two book ideas. Which one do you think I should do first? And she said, do the one first that if no one opens the cover, it won't kill you. It won't make you never write again. Because first books usually fail. No one cares. They're terrible. And so write that one, get it out, and then take everything you learned about the experience of writing a book and pour your heart and soul into the second book. So I did that. I thought, okay, I'm Making Mediation Your Day Job. I have this simple idea about turning what we know about building dialogue, turning it on its head so we can market in ways that feel palatable to us. My grad students are asking for this. Audiences that I'm speaking to are asking for this. Okay, I will do this. I hope it's helpful, but if it isn't, it will not sear my soul for posterity. And then I'll turn my attention to The Conflict Pivot. And so The Conflict Pivot, Making Mediation Your Day Job, had much more lasting power than I ever anticipated. And then a few years ago, I finally finished The Conflict Pivot, which was much harder to write because it scared me more about getting it right and about feeling that it might fail. And so it's really about, The Conflict Pivot is about some habits of mind that I teach my own clients and use myself to change the way we think about conflict and the engagement of conflict so that we're more able to do it more successfully. In some ways, it's the mirror image, ironically, of making mediation your day job. They're about two entirely different topics, but they're each about sort of how you think about this and how you approach it, and how you inhabit this thing that you may not really want to do. How do you make it palatable and do it and have it be much more effective? And how do you adopt habits of mind that are fruitful? And how do you get rid of habits of mind that keep you trapped, either in not marketing or in a conflict? And so that's how those two books differ from each other, but it's also what unites them. And clearly those things about sort of habits of mind are always what inform so much of my work, and always have, maybe because I was a teacher first and a professor and an educator first, and my doctoral work was in sort of what prompts behavior change. So all these things have been buzzing around in myself for a lot of years.
Thank you for that. And like we're on today on a podcast, you also have your own podcast on your website, right?
Yes, podcast and blog, they're identical.
Got it. So yeah, just wanted to share that with listeners and viewers. If you're listening to this, you can check out the YouTube video of this recording to learn more and follow. But you can check it out yourself at tammylenski.com. That's TAMYLENSKI.com. And that'll have everything you need to learn more about Tammy and check out her resources. So I'm actually interested in the conflict pivot because I'm all about these days trying to find resolutions and solutions and tips to resolve conflicts and disputes that people have, not just at an interpersonal level, but also at a societal level. Because I think some of the same tools we use between individuals can also be applied higher up as well. Okay. With that, just let me go back to my next question. And that is, in your book, you reference different thinkers and speakers, for example, William Ury or Timothy Ferriss. What other people would you expand on, who mediators and people who are interested in conflict resolution? Who else should we tend to follow? Who else has made an impact on you and who's helped you expand in your profession?
In terms of published books, I mean, there have been tons of mentors in my life that the people I studied mediation with many years ago first, and who remain friends and colleagues who I later became a faculty colleague with, teaching mediation. So there are countless folks like that. But in terms of published authors, in the conflict resolution field, I'll read anything without even knowing anything about it. I'll read anything by folks like Michael Lang and Bernie Mayer. Michael's been very actively publishing and engaging during the pandemic. Bernie has a new book that's dropping imminently. He posted something on Facebook in the last couple of days. I think it's today or yesterday. It's coming very soon. So those folks are just stars, continue to have star power, continue to press my own thinking, and I love that. I also always encourage mediators and any conflict resolution professional to read outside of conflict resolution. Maybe it's because I came from being an educator before I was anything else, in that I think professions outside our own have a lot to teach us. I compete in dog agility with my street dog, who is an elite, competes at the elite level. And training her and learning about training and teaching agility dogs taught me tons about conflict resolution, amazingly, and I'm always reading something by a trainer and thinking, whoa, there's a really strong human parallel to that. But in terms of sort of outside our field, I'll read anything by the Heath brothers, Dan and Chip Heath. One's a professor at Stanford, one's I think at Duke. They've written some books together. They've written some separately. They've got one of them has a new book out I just gave to my husband for Christmas. They write a lot about how to think about how you think and how we process. Similarly, Dan Pink, I'll read anything by him. I think he's brilliant. Adam Grant, who's at Wharton. A lot about sort of how we make decisions and how we process information and the fallacies that trip us up and the biases that trip us up. Brilliant writers. And they're all accessible writers. they're not just they don't have a tome that's this thick and it's really 5 books, one book repeated 5 times really densely. They're not like that at all. I also really always encourage mediators to read outside their lives. I read poetry by David White and recommend him strongly because he writes incredible things about human dynamics. Ta-Nehisi Coates, Colson Whitehead, people whose lives I don't have that experience of, and frankly, push me to be uncomfortable about things in my life as a result of reading them. I think it's really important for mediators to make themselves uncomfortable regularly. How can we dare to ask people to come sit down at our mediation table, whether it's the literal one that we don't get to see so much in the last 2 years or the figurative one online, and say to them, we want you to come in here and do this thing that's going to be really uncomfortable for you, but I'm never going to make myself uncomfortable. I'm going to live just within all the things I do. So I really think that mediators by practice need to remind themselves what it feels like to learn to take a class in something they know nothing about and think they are lousy at. So I got started in dog agility. And then also to read beyond the bounds of their culture and their geographic norms and their family norms and be pushed. I think so when I'm talking to mediators and saying, what do you read? Those are the kinds of people that I'm always encouraging, the people that I can get really excited about, even while I'm kind of grinding my teeth and going, wow, I'm getting something about me being pushed back against pretty hard. It's making me uncomfortable here at 11 p.m. at night when I'm reading.
So Tammy, thank you for sharing that perspective. I agree wholeheartedly that it's important for us as mediators to make sure that we are thinking outside the box to help parties. And the best way to do that is to make sure you're exposed to new ideas and new thoughts and different interests. So I know that the three of us have all read your book. And as everybody knows, I've now read your book twice or more times. But I think it would be really beneficial for those who are listening to understand a little bit better about some of the suggestions that you make in your book. And we touched on a few minutes ago how you really framed approaching marketing using terminology that we recognize as mediators, things like reframing how you approach it and building dialogue and creating space for these opportunities. And I love how you used what I'll call mediator speak to speak to mediators so that we could learn how to market our practice. When I first read your book and started taking your class, the thing that probably made my heart stop the most was the suggestion to narrow your market. But you were right. And so I would love for you to share with our audience your views on that and why you think it works and how people can implement that.
There's an old marketing truism, and some truisms turn out over time not to be particularly true, and maybe this one day will be proven otherwise. But most marketing people will say to you, when you market to everyone, you market to no one, because you have to water your message down to try to appeal to everybody. And in conflict, sure, mediators say to me all the time, well, everybody has conflict. How people do conflict is generally similar. We have the same kinds of problems. All true in every field. But it's the difference between, and the example, you might remember this, Sylvia, from the Thrive course, is let's take a non-mediation example. Let's say I am starting a catalog for antique car enthusiasts, and it's parts that they can order to replace parts they need for their antique cars. Well, I'm trying to figure out how to reach my market and where they will be. And so one thing I can do is I can walk into my local Shaw's, which is our large grocery store across town, and I could go inside and I could yell, anybody here happen to like some antique cars or need an antique car part? I could say that. That's the equivalent of marketing to everyone. I'm sending some messages out into the world. It feels safe. I've actually done marketing right, but they're not reaching potentially anybody that it needs to reach. Or I could go in my town in the summers, the Rotary does what's called a cruise in, and people who have antique cars in the area come and they park them there, and people can vote on the neatest, the coolest one, or the oldest one, or the best restored one. And the people who are at that thing are the market that I would want. They are antique car enthusiasts. They are the people that I need to reach. So I could go to Shaw's and yell to the wind by trying to market to everybody, or I could figure out who I want to speak to, the people I care about, not the people I hate or don't care about, what and where they congregate. And when I do that, and I mean by where congregate, it might be in person, it might be online, and what their particular needs and interests are, then I increase the odds dramatically that my marketing message, the thing I'm trying to get people's attention about, what I do, actually reaches the market that is going to be the most compelled by it. So that's the concept of narrowing your market rather than trying to yell to the wind and hope that anybody who comes through the door. And mediators who hear that message sometimes say to me, but I want to be able to say yes to anybody who comes through the door. I don't want to have to say no. And I'm like, you don't have to say no. So if a kindergarten teacher comes through the door and says, I need a mediator, you don't have to say, I'm sorry, I only do antique car enthusiasts. Go away, please. No, you can say yes. And it also doesn't mean you have to pick one market for all time. When I started out, I started in higher ed because that's where I knew. I had worked for a number of presidents and vice presidents, and in higher ed, presidents and vice presidents, senior team members move. They go to other institutions. And so I started in higher ed, and at the time, no one was doing in mediation and conflict resolution work in higher ed except attorneys who were doing legal work. So I had the market sort of to myself, which helped a lot. And then I didn't do it because I thought I only want to work with higher ed people for the rest of my life. I love higher ed, but it didn't seem very appealing or interesting over time. But what happens is higher ed, a lot of institutions, universities in the US have medical schools attached to them and hospitals. And soon I was getting requests from hospitals and medical institutions and began to develop that market. So it doesn't mean one narrow market for life. It means focus your energy, pick the one that has the greatest likelihood of an early win for you, and then build from there. Sometimes markets will come to you. I talk about that in the book. Sometimes you develop them because you're interested.
And given the fact that there's already these almost 8 years that passed since the book was published, if you were to write this book today, what would you change, delete, or add?
I scanned the book last night because I hadn't read it in a while. And I thought, with that question in my mind, is there anything I would do differently? And I don't really think there's much I would do differently. The tools we use to market may change, but the fundamentals really don't. And I think people get captivated by tools, this new social media platform or this new mechanism. And that's like pursuing the shiny new object syndrome. It's not useful. It's a really good way to scatter your attention and your focus. So I don't think I would change a whole lot. I might focus more on how to have what I call learning conversations with people in your prospective market. So you really get to do a deeper dive into what they need when they're in conflict, because that's what they're wondering. Mediators are like, typically when a new service or a new product is developed, it's because somebody saw a need in the marketplace and developed this thing. Mediators find themselves, and have for a very long time, in a sort of a difficult position in that we have a service we desperately want people to buy, but people don't necessarily think or want a mediator. People may think or want they need a conflict resolution person, but someone who does an opening statement, does a certain process, and finishes with a closing statement, depending how you were trained as a mediator, not everybody wants that. And so what I really push now, if I'm teaching a mediator, is I push them to think about who their market is and have a certain kind of conversation with those folks about to figure out when they're stuck in a conflict, when a conflict is brewing, and they want to get in front of it, or a conflict is going very badly and escalating and potentially very damaging to their relationship or their business or whatever it is, or their neighborhood. What are the things they wish they had someone lining up next to them to say, here, do this, do this, do this, help, try this, try that. So if I were writing the book today, I'd probably push that type of information a little more. How do you have those learning conversations? What goes into them? How do you set them up? How do you do them in a way that it's similar? Sylvia would remember that exercise from the Thrive course years ago. I made that a bigger part of that course than it had been in the book.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned the example earlier of somebody going into, you said Shaw's, right? Is that a grocery store up in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, it's just a chain. Yeah. Grocery chain.
Okay, yes. So down here we have Kroger's and H-E-B's, which is a little different. Yeah, but no.
Yeah.
And it was a good picture because a lot of times we do that. We kind of see the marketplace as just a broad audience, okay? Or especially in the online world, we see Google as just this place where you put your, item, and you hope that people who are just passing by, based on whatever query they put into the internet, will run into it, hopefully on page 1, and hopefully on the top of page 1, where everyone's eyes, kind of stop reading. But forgetting that there's how many trillions of web pages are on the web. So I promise you, if you're listening out there and you have a website and you're trying to market mediation and nobody's finding you, you are on Google, just on page 250, where no one's going to see it, right?
Right.
And so the trick then is always, well, how do you make yourself relevant? And that's what Google actually uses, that phrase, a relevant search result. Okay. So it's interesting. How do we take that physical world that you described? We're trying to, market car parts and Shaw's versus going to the actual, like car parts or antique car conference. How do you take that and translate it to the new world that we live in? And I know you're not a computer engineer or anything like that, but do you have any, I guess, just off the cuff overall suggestions on for people who don't know anything about this kind of marketing in this new world? I mean, I'm a lawyer. I was a teacher years ago. I didn't know anything about this stuff either, right? You have to teach yourself a lot. But what would you just suggest to someone who's brand new into online marketing, trying to market your mediation practice?
I would say stop trying to get on the first page of Google. Unless you've got tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars to get on the general mediation or conflict resolution search pages at the top of that for Google, it's an utter waste of your time. Your energy is far better spent, and your money focusing on a narrow market who may be searching for, if you're really interested in search being the way, and I would doubt whether that's really a good strategy either, but if search is your thing, if you want to get on the top page of results, you got to figure out what people in your narrow market are Googling to get.
Correct.
And then you are going to make that the priority about what you write about and what you podcast about and what you speak about and what you make videos about. That has to be your sort of ad nauseum approach. But, there was a day when being at the top of Google wasn't an impossibility. Last time I looked, I was still number 1 for a funny phrase because of a blog post I wrote years ago. So it could still happen. Maybe I'm still in that number 1 slot for that, but no one in the world is ever going to look for that phrase.
What's that? What's the spot?
The Shamu maneuver. It was a blog post I wrote about a New York Times article that my husband sent me. And when he sent it to me, he said, now husbands everywhere will not fall prey to the Shamu maneuver. And the article was written by a woman who was an animal trainer. And she realized, it was a very tongue-in-cheek article, but she realized somewhere along the way as she was teaching like killer whales to do things, that she could use the same techniques on her husband. So he would know where to put where he left his keys, and she wouldn't get caught into the whirlwind every morning of where are my keys? Oh my gosh, And So so I wrote a post about that. And anyway, so you could end up on the top page of Google for something, but nothing that anybody cares about. Your energy is best spent finding places online. And if you're regional, if you have a regional or a local practice in person, that your tribe, to overuse a really sort of tired phrase. I shouldn't even use the word anymore. It's been so overused. But your group, your people that you're trying to reach, where they congregate, and spend your energy there. And when you spend your energy, the energy isn't what I see so many mediators doing in social media. They just keep posting. They're talking at the world. And there's no engagement. And now I have to say, it's a lot of work to engage. It's one of the reasons I don't spend a lot of energy on social media. And I'm not sure the way social media has evolved makes it even compelling for very many people to do anymore. I used to be somewhat active on Twitter. I might every now and then go post something. I'm on Facebook, but only with my 26 closest friends. I don't use LinkedIn. But what I see mediators doing is try mediation, or, oh, this is a really cool article about mediation. Do you need a mediator today? Try mediation. And I see that, and there's no real engagement with the people they're trying to reach. That's the engagement is the piece, the building dialogue, the two-way conversation that the word dialogue implies. That's where that comes from. And that's deeper work. But it's also much more fulfilling. It also likely has far better results than just sort of being a bullhorn all the time. So
I think your point is very well taken, that building relationships and that connection is really a cornerstone of being an effective mediator and an effective marketer.
Right.
And another cornerstone of mediation is that we seek to discern between a party's positions versus their interests, their needs versus their wants, those kinds of things. And one of the things I loved about your book is how you use those same concepts to help people think through marketing, because it's not just an effective approach to think about what people's interests and needs are in the context of the mediation, but it's also helpful when you're framing your marketing and how you go about that. Could you talk a little bit about that, sort of what mediators should be thinking about when they're preparing the content of their marketing to try and reach out to the interests and the needs of the audience?
Well, I think you said it pretty perfectly. I don't know that I could say it better than that, Sylvia. I guess I would just add that be sure you cut out the mediator jargon. Mediators also spend an inordinate amount of time selling process. No one cares. We care, and we are right to care, because we know that great process can help yield great results. And that lousy process can really get in the way of satisfaction and outcome that people want. But no one cares that your voice will, how do I want to say this? No one cares about the mediation process. And I see so many mediators saying, we'll protect you at the table and you'll be able to have your voice heard. And yeah, good. Those are lovely. They're wonderful sentiments. I don't disagree with them. I just think they're lousy for marketing, because every mediator in the world is saying that. And so you're just saying the same thing that people tune out when they keep hearing the same thing. It also has no meaning for people. They don't know what that means. So stay away from the jargon, stay away from process. Make the content of your marketing speak to the people who you're trying to reach. So an example of that, I saw reference to a mediator recently who has a practice focusing on conflict resolution for homeless people. And not for homeless people alone, but for also the shelters that serve them. Now, I have no idea if his practice is healthy or not, or if it's new or old. I have no idea. I don't know anything about him. But it's an interesting idea from a marketing, from an example point of view. He is able to speak about and write about. I don't know if he does, but if I were him, I would be designing tiny little mini courses, 1 and 2 minute things about when a homeless person and you are having this argument about subject X, Y, or Z, do this one thing and it will help make the conversation better. That's what I mean. And you're speaking very specifically to that particular conversation that they're having that's different than the conversation I'm having with my husband over lunch, probably. Some things are timeless. They appear in all conflict, not in all cultures necessarily, but in similar cultures, geographically speaking, ethnically speaking, that may be true. But how we talk about that thing or how we navigate that thing is dependent on the context that we live in. If we're homeless, we're maybe having that conversation in a different way than I'm having comfortably at my warm dining room table at lunchtime if I'm having a similar argument with my husband. So you're speaking to those very specific markets, and it enables you to speak in ways. And when I say speak, it might be write, it might be podcast, it might be video, whatever it is. It might be being on a forum. Who knows what it is? So when I say speak, I mean it in the general sense of the word. It enables you to address what's on their mind in ways that they say, this person truly gets me and my circumstances and my life in the way that I live it or the way that I work it. And that is marketing gold for when it can be achieved.
It couldn't be said any clearer. Thank you for that. And really, this encouragement for looking for a niche actually to market is a golden rule for everybody. Because in today's world, you need to differ with something. You need to offer something special. Otherwise, you are just put into a box or a bucket with everybody who does the same. And also, mediation is such a fantastic tool that you can really expand into so many different areas, sometimes in the areas that you are not even aware of. It is up to you to invent it. And it's like with your service to others, because, service in a way that you offer something that can really help the society, neighbors, community you live in. It's just up to you to open your mind, your eyes, and look for those paths and ways where you can be needed. And having said that, I think it can be very transforming to many people in the way they think, they approach things, even if they are really motivated by fear in so many instances when it comes to marketing, because it's like exposing themselves. But I wanted to ask you, in your personal life, after all these extensive studies, after all these questions you've asked yourself, your students, and then also you ask the mediators in the book, what did this book, this approach, teach you? And what did it bring to you as a mediator, as a scholar, and entrepreneur?
I think in terms of what the book taught me, it really taught me how to write a book and make it coherent and allow my own voice to shine through. People say to me all the time if they get to know me, my goodness, you sound just like your book. And, with an academic background, how many dry academic books did I read for my master's degree and my doctorate, and, the kind of books that I'd have to keep hitting myself with it in order to stay awake. I did not want it to be that book. And so it taught me to just allow my voice to be my voice. And that was a good reminder, for a marketer, essentially, right? I want people to say, hey, you sound just like your book. To me, that's the greatest compliment. So that's really what, and how to write a book and stick with it. Not stick with it is not really a problem for me, but I tend to maybe overstick with some things. But to see it through, to allow the fear to just tell it to get in the corner and shut up while I work on the book. And that's a good lesson too. I remember the first day I sat in my office, I was a spanking brand new dean of students at a college. And I had been an assistant dean prior to that at a different institution across town. This was in Burlington, Vermont. I sat down at my desk and I thought, it's that imposter syndrome thing. I thought, I wonder how long it's going to take them to realize I have no clue at all how to be a dean of students, and thinking, oh my gosh. And it was a great job. It was a great career. I left, I was promoted, but I left because I didn't want to be a college president. And that was sort of the next thing up for me. And I had a whole lifetime ahead of me, and that was not, I realized what I wanted. So the book also sort of pushed me to address those fears of, what if no one likes it? Oh, well, life goes on, no one likes it, then it falls off of Amazon and no one ever buys it ever again. and my life will go on, and I find another avenue, and so be it. So that was a good takeaway for me.
Thank you for that. I'm actually going to change the question I was going to ask, because you just said something that was interesting about, what if no one likes, X?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? What are your thoughts about, I guess, online reviews and the popularity of being popular? Now we review everything in our society. Okay. I mean, you want a toaster, there's the Model X on Amazon that's been reviewed by 5 grandmothers somewhere. I never cared before what those grandmothers thought about anything, total strangers on the internet, but all of a sudden I find myself just begging to know, please, what do you think? How did you experience this?
Yeah.
So when it comes to our profession, we've seen Yelp, Avo for lawyers, Google reviews, of course. What are your thoughts about the publicity of being popular online and shying away from it? Should you chase after it? How should it be incorporated into your marketing strategy? Thoughts?
Well, I hear a couple of different questions there. One about sort of seeking popularity online, and the other is about what people find out about you online and how people determine whether you're the trustworthy person they want to hand their conflict to, right? Yeah. So let me take that second one first. Your social proof is something that I tell mediators, you've got to think about how you're going to handle that. Social proof is the idea that there's something on your website, in your social media, somewhere on the presence that represents you online. And I always say that should be a website that you own, not someone else's website that you get to rent for free some property on. Facebook is an example. That may be great for your marketing, but they own you. They own they don't maybe technically own it, but if they go away or they ban you, your home on the web is gone. You should always have your hub, your center should be something you control. And it may have lots of spokes, but the hub should be yours. And that hub needs to be able to do 2 things. It needs to be able to show people that other people think you have your wits about you. And that's the social proof of testimonials and things like that. You also need to be able to demonstrate. And mediators and this idea of social proof and testimonials and review are a lot about telling. But I think it's so much more important to demonstrate your value. I was hired last year by a fairly sizable, well-known international firm to do some work for them. And somewhere fairly far in the hiring process, I said to them, I'm interested. You haven't asked for references. And don't you want references? Everybody always asks for references. How do you know I have a clue? And the guy who was doing the hiring, who had 40 hours of basic mediation training himself, he said, I've been following you for about a year. I've been following your blog, and I've listened to what you've said, and I have tried what you said. And I don't need anybody else at this point to tell me whether you were good or not. You're going to only give me names of people who are going to say good things about you anyway. I said, sure, I trolled the web to see if anybody had something that was terribly evil to know about you. Yeah, we did our due diligence. But you demonstrated to me that you know what you're talking about, and I can see the fit you're going to be as a result of that. So that's what I talk about when I'm saying demonstrate. And again, it's how you write, it's what you write about, it's how you speak to that market very specifically. When you demonstrate your value, the question of just telling them you have value it's still an important piece, but it shouldn't be the dominant piece. Demonstrating it should be the dominant piece. So the second part of your question was about popularity. I looked back, and I joined Twitter in 2007, and that was probably within a year or so of when Twitter started. It was really easy to get followers, and it's really hard now. Everyone wants to go viral. Everybody wants a great TikTok video that everybody thinks is awesome. There's a lot of energy put into that, and I fear that the quest for popularity, the quest to be the popular kid in school, is not only just damaging to people's morale and interest in doing marketing, because it's a hard thing to reach, but it also is distracting people from doing just the basic important work of who are you serving, how are you serving them, how do you speak to them, how do you build a connection with them, where do you find them, that really important stuff. And I think sometimes the popularity quest is about the same thing as walking into the grocery store and going, anybody in here need a mediator? You're trying to speak to everybody. And it's just really, I think it's a big black hole. And that, there's always going to be an exception. There's going to be the mediation rock star who no one's ever heard of, who suddenly rises to popularity next year because of the most amazing TikTok video they created. That's going to happen. That's not going to be 99.9% of us. So you can't get away from doing and answering, why am I in this work? Who are you that I want to serve? What do you need when you're stuck? And how are you going to find that need? Those central questions. I was thinking about, whichever one of the three of you asked me the question, what would you do differently, or in the book this time, there is actually another piece of that. And that is about showing up to do the work. At some point along the way, and it's actually back to your question, Sylvia, about do I still do any marketing stuff? At some point, I've said everything I have to say. People just need to do it. It's that thing I wrote about in one of my newsletters a few weeks ago, is everyone says they want to write a book, and that's not true. Everyone wants to have written a book, right? And the thing that mediators have to do, if they need to market themselves to build their practice, unless they're trust fund babies or they got someone else who's doing it on their staff for them, if they have to be the ones to do that, they've got to master the art of showing up and doing the hard stuff. I put this quote that I ran into. It's by a stand-up comedian who I don't know, Cameron Esposito. And they said, I'm often asked how to have a career in stand-up. And the answer is confoundingly simple. Do the work. Over and over again, do the work. After you build the courage to get on stage that first time, it's all about repetition. And mastering the art of showing up to do the hard thing and do it again tomorrow and do it again next week. That's what it takes. And I think if I felt like I beat that a little bit to death in the book the first time around, but I might make it more pointed about mastering the art of the habit of showing up to do the work. I think that is just an essential thing for mediators. Do it. Stop reading about it, start consuming. A lot of us consume information, but we don't bridge the gap between knowing and doing. And we have to inhabit that gap. And at some point, if we really are serious about our practices, we have to say, I am afraid of this, I'm uncomfortable in this, or whatever it is that's holding us back, and say, I'm going to do it anyway. And that's why I stopped doing this work, because I have said everything I need to say. People now actually just need to get out there and do it.
So I really love how you hit on some really important points there, that you have to know yourself. You have to know the needs of those you want to serve, and you have to do the work. Sort of adding on top of that, one of the chapters in your book is a chapter on reframing how you help and how you talk about what you do. And it's something that at the beginning of this program, we went around and introduced ourselves. And I'll just pick on myself. I introduced myself as an arbitrator, mediator, and an attorney. And yes, those things are true. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't really say to people what I do and how I help them. Mm-hmm. And I take away from your chapter on reframing this, that we need to reach our audience by explaining to them how we help. Do I have that right? And what suggestions do you have for mediators as we're thinking through that?
Well, I think it's about knowing the audience that you're talking to. If I'm talking to another mediator or conflict resolution, I think conflict resolution is the umbrella. Facilitator, mediator, early neutral evaluator, arbitrator, trainer, coach. These are all under the umbrella of conflict resolution. So sometimes I say mediator, and I mean it in the sort of the broadest possible sense. You're mediator, you're getting in the middle of somebody's conflict in some way. when I'm talking to a group of mediators and people say, what do you do? I'm perfectly comfortable saying I mediate, I coach, I train, I do these things, I consult. If I'm talking to, I was talking to a doctor a couple of weeks ago, and she said, what do you do? And if I had said I'm a mediator to her, I'm assuming that she would have made some assumptions. A, that I'm an attorney, and B, that I do divorce mediation. Or maybe I do things for HR. You know, that's the assumption, generally speaking, that people make, at least in my part of the world where I see people in person. But I don't answer it that way. I tell her actually what I do. And I'm not going to say to you what I do, because that's a sentence I've worked on for a while for me and what is right for me. And if I say it, everybody starts using that sentence. It's not useful. Make it about you. But it's figuring out who are you talking to and what matters to them, especially if they're your market. Now, that doctor isn't in my market, but if they had been, I would have been thinking about what do doctors care about with respect to conflict. You know, if I'm talking to a surgical nurse, what do surgical nurses struggle with? I can tell you that because I have trained surgical nurses. They struggle with being able to confront a really hot doctor, hot in the professional sense, not physical sense, a hot doctor who's at the top of his or her field, who's about to make a mistake in the middle of a surgery. And they have got to be the one to say, don't do that. Hang on, stop. And now, this is not their only concern, but it's one of the concerns. How do they confront this doctor who's at the top of his or her career, who's going to say, I get to decide what is wrong and right here. You be quiet. And is going to come back later and take them down. How do they confront those things? So if I had a surgical nurse who would ask me that question, I would probably say something about, well, for example, I help people like surgical nurses figure out how to confront problems in the surgery setting in a way that doesn't leave debris in their wake afterwards, but also make sure that patients stay healthy. Okay, so I'm speaking to what they do, and I do that particularly around conflict. And so that surgical nurse at that point is probably going to say to me, really? There's somebody who does that? And I can tell you that because people do say that. And then again, if I don't care if they're not in my market, I'm happy to have a lovely conversation with them about it. But if they're in my market, that's the kind of response I want. It ultimately ends with, can you send me your website information? You know, it used to be, can you give me your card? No one asks for a card anymore. That's what I mean by knowing who you're talking to. And if they're in your market, knowing what is on their minds about conflict. Sure, we all care about confronting. We all care about making sure the relationship doesn't get any more damage when we confront. But how that transpires in a surgical ward feels, the language around it and the dynamics and the debris of it are a little different than how it feels if you're talking to a parent and a teen and you do parent-teen conflict resolution, right? So that's what I mean about honing your message to speak to those interests of that particular person without using the labels of mediator or conflict resolver or arbitrator or whatever people use.
Thank you so much. Go ahead and tell you.
Yeah, by saying exactly what you've just said, Tammy, I think you conveyed a secret message that you can actually do marketing of your mediation practice every single day, every single moment, and to everybody you meet. It's just for you to transform the words you wanted to say to a language understandable to them, and also making them understand what change it will, an impact it will have, positive impact it will have on their lives. And I think that is also a very valuable hint for everybody who wishes to know more about marketing and also about doing mediation. I also wanted to thank you because what you've just shown to us throughout this entire hour of our conversation, I just can't believe how it went so fast. But this was the authenticity and integrity of what you are doing and who you are. And I think that this is the key to, as you said, so many lawyers who just sometimes dislike their clients for what they do. But this is the practice we are in. And maybe our clients sometimes dislike us. So we have to be aware of that and also work
in every profession.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that you've just embraced such important concepts of everyday life and of everyday relationship with people who surround us, whom we meet for the first time, And I'm very grateful for that. And thank you for it, Tammy.
Thank you. Thank you. You all have asked such fun questions and really given me a chance to talk about things that I don't practice in my profession in terms of teaching this stuff all the time, but that are still near and dear to my heart. I want our fields, the conflict resolution field, to be important to people, for us, what we do to matter in our countries and our cultures and our families. And the way that happens is that we have to do an increasingly better job of reaching the people we're trying to reach, so that when they have a problem, they think of us. They don't think first of a therapist. They don't necessarily automatically think first of an attorney who will represent them, in that way, that they include us in their thinking about that stuff.
Exactly. Sylvia, before I close out, did you want to add any final points?
I just want to say thank you so much, Tammy. I just love how you have drawn from the skills and the tools we use as a mediator and helped us as mediators utilize those to market our skills back out into the world. I think most people are drawn to mediation, underlying it all is because they want to help people.
Right.
And that really is the message we need to give them. And it's just framing that, help us help you type of dialogue, so that you can connect with people and get out there and really help people move past conflict. I always use the phrase that I'm helping people find a path to resolution. You want to move them past conflict and get on down the road so they can resolve this and move forward. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom with us today. And I highly encourage any of our listeners to read the book. It's a quick read, and it is a meaningful read, and it'll help you grow your mediation practice.
Oh, thank you so much. You all are all doing awesome work in the world as well. So
yes,
it's nice to
thank you
have
so
been
much,
invited.
Tammy. Yes, no, thank you so much. And I definitely agree that this book gives a lot of mediators who would be unfamiliar with marketing the courage to actually go out there and expose themselves a little bit and be a little bit vulnerable, because mediation marketing is something that is completely new to many people. And your book is, written by somebody who actually went out there and just did it. And that's what you got to do. You got to show up and actually do the work. So I get it when you say you've said all you have to say, because you've done it. And so people just need to make it happen.
Yep.
All right. With that, we're closing out. Everybody, until next time, we got another great speaker coming up in the next episode. And Tammy, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good wishes.